I remember standing in the kitchen of my parents' farmhouse one winter evening, my hands wrapped around a mug of weak coffee, listening to the sound of sleigh bells outside as a neighbor passed by. Nothing dramatic was happening. Supper dishes were done. The kerosene lamp hummed softly. But inside me, there was a quiet awareness that time was moving and that other people had opinions about where I should be by now. I grew up Old Order Amish in Pennsylvania. I was baptized young, married young, and for most of my early life, I did exactly what was expected of me. I didn't feel trapped all the time. I didn't feel miserable every day. What I felt, more often than anything, was a steady, low-pressure current guiding me in a certain direction, whether I consciously chose it or not. Marriage was one of those directions. There's a common belief among outsiders that Amish people arrange marriages, or that young women are forced into them. That isn't accurate. No one ever sat me down and told me who I had to marry or when. There were no ultimatums, no threats. But pressure doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, dressed up as concern, tradition, and the gentle ticking of a clock no one names out loud. In the Amish church, marriage is closely tied to adulthood, stability, and spiritual safety. The Ordnung doesn't say you must marry by a certain age, but the culture fills in those blanks. Marriage is seen as protection, especially for women. It is meant to anchor you, to keep you from drifting into pride, temptation, or too much independence. From the community's perspective, marrying young keeps the group strong and cohesive. It's not meant to harm, it's meant to preserve. I remember one Sunday afternoon sitting on a hard wooden bench after church, my feet aching from standing through the long service. An older woman leaned toward me and asked gently if I had been keeping company with anyone yet. I said no. She nodded, smiled, and said, "Well, don't wait too long. It gets harder." That was it. No judgment in her voice. But the message stayed with me for weeks. Another moment comes back to me from a wedding I attended when I was 19. The bride was younger than me, glowing and nervous in her stiff new dress. During the meal afterward, I overheard two women whispering about how nice it was she hadn't waited. One of them glanced in my direction without really looking at me and said, "Some girls think too much." It wasn't said unkindly, but it landed where it landed. Pressure in Amish life rarely comes as a command. It comes as comparison, as repetition, as watching who is celebrated and who quietly fades into the background. Unmarried women past a certain age aren't shunned, but they are noticed. And being noticed in that way is uncomfortable. The expectation exists for reasons that make sense within the community. The Amish value early family formation because it reinforces shared labor, shared faith, and interdependence. A married woman has a clear role. She belongs to a household that fits neatly into the church structure. Singleness, especially long-term singleness, introduces uncertainty. It raises questions that the culture doesn't have good answers for. I remember sitting at my parents' table one evening while my mother kneaded bread. She didn't look at me when she spoke. She just said, "I don't want you to be alone." I knew what she meant. She wasn't talking about loneliness in a romantic sense. She was talking about security, about having someone to provide, to decide, to stand between me and a world she believed was dangerous. Her concern was real, but so was the weight of it. When I did start keeping company, everything moved quickly. That's normal in Amish culture. Courtships are short, engagements are shorter. There isn't much room to linger in uncertainty. Once a relationship is visible, the assumption is that marriage will follow. People begin speaking as if it already has. Plans are hinted at. Dates are suggested. Momentum takes over. I remember walking home from an evening visit with the man I would eventually marry, the gravel crunching under my shoes in the dark. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't certain either. I didn't have language for that uncertainty. There wasn't space to sit with it. When everyone around you treats hesitation as a flaw, you learn to override it. The community reinforces these expectations in subtle ways. Sermons emphasize order, humility, and the dangers of selfish choice. Advice is offered as wisdom, not instruction. Silence is used effectively. When a woman doesn't follow the expected path, people simply stop asking certain questions. That quiet can feel heavier than open criticism. Emotionally, the pressure doesn't always show up as panic. For me, it showed up as narrowing. Options seemed to close without anyone explicitly closing them. I didn't feel like I was being pushed down a hallway, but like doors were gently, politely shutting behind me. I want to be clear that not all Amish women experience this as negative. Some feel genuinely ready to marry young. Some find deep companionship and peace within that structure. I know women who are content, grounded, and grateful for the life they built early. Their stories are real too, and they deserve respect. But contentment doesn't erase pressure. Both can exist at the same time. After I left the Amish community, I had to learn how much of my decision-making had been shaped by unspoken timelines. I realized how rarely I had asked myself what I wanted apart from what was expected. That realization didn't come with anger. It came with sadness and then with understanding. There's one more scene that stays with me. I was visiting an old friend a year before I left, sitting with her in her laundry room while the washing machine rattled. She was unmarried, older than most brides, and deeply kind. She laughed easily, but when I asked her if she was happy, she hesitated just long enough for me to notice. Then she said, "I'm fine." We both knew that word was doing a lot of work. This is where I want to spend a little more time, because it connects directly to how quickly marriage happens, the relationship between baptism and timing. In the Amish church, baptism is a serious, permanent commitment. Once you are baptized, you are fully accountable to the Ordnung. That includes expectations around behavior, dress, and life choices. Many young people choose baptism in their late teens or early 20s, often just before or during courtship. After baptism, the pressure to settle into adult roles increases noticeably. Marriage becomes not just a personal milestone, but a sign of spiritual maturity. Remaining unmarried for long after baptism can feel like being suspended between stages of life. You are no longer a youth, but not fully settled as an adult in the community's eyes. That in-between space is uncomfortable, and most people move quickly to resolve it. This is one reason marriages happen so fast. It isn't only romance or tradition, it's the desire to align spiritual commitment with social stability as efficiently as possible. Understanding this helped me see that the pressure wasn't targeted or personal, it was structural. It came from a system designed to reduce uncertainty, even if that meant moving people along before they felt fully ready. Looking back now, I don't frame my experience as being forced, but I also don't frame it as purely free choice. It lives somewhere in between. Pressure doesn't always bruise. Sometimes it shapes. I share this not to discourage or warn, but to add texture to a conversation that's often flattened into extremes. Amish women are not powerless, and they are not immune to influence. Like women everywhere, they navigate expectations, love, fear, and belonging with the tools available to them. If you've lived inside a culture with unspoken timelines, you may recognize this feeling, even if your world looked very different from mine. I'd be interested to hear how pressure showed up in your life, or how you learned to listen for your own voice beneath it.